Hello and welcome into the Fog.net podcast. My name is Michael Swain, the Kansas beat writer for 24/7 Sports. It's a Sunday in the football season, which means I'm here with Kevin Flaherty. We're going to break down Kansas football's 29-27 loss to Kansas State in the Sunflower Showdown. Kevin, I think to some degree, I could probably just go take last year's podcast after this game and just play that right now. And then I'll go in and just clip a couple different moments and that'll encompass a lot of the conversation. Or we could just replay a lot of the podcasts we've heard, so far this season, Kevin. It's another kind of one of these Groundhog Day moments where for KU, a fourth quarter lead turns into a defeat, plenty of moments along the way. And I know, Kevin, we don't usually do podcasts very chronologically throughout the course of the game, but this game was jam-packed.
It was
just action and plays and mistakes on both sides of the ball. And for both teams, this was not a clean football game. And I think there's a lot to break down. So we'll go in order. But Kevin, I know obviously you were there last night, getting to see it all. What was your kind of perspective on getting to see both these teams in person for another year in a row?
Nobody wants to hear this the day after a loss, but I thought it was a pretty big-time college football game. I mean, it was a great atmosphere. I thought, a lot of times I feel like when you watch a big Sunday or Saturday night SEC game or something, there's nervousness, there's sloppiness, right? It doesn't always come out that it's the best played thing, but there you are at the end, kind of biting your fingernails to see what happens. And it felt like that. There were a lot of momentum shifts, a lot of swings, a lot of, why did you make that play? Why didn't you make that play? And so it went back and forth. And quite frankly, I mean, I know we're going to go chronologically before we get into any big picture stuff, but quite frankly, I thought it was two really evenly matched teams.
I agree, Kevin. And that's, I think, a theme for Kansas this season is the fact that this is a team that is good enough to beat any team it plays. I wrote this in the VIP story, kind of the three things we learned. And, I was like, if someone from the future, Kevin, were to come back and say, hey, guys, Kansas is going to win out and they're going to make a bowl game, I would say, I don't believe that's going to happen, but I can see a world in which that does happen. And that's just based on the fact that Kansas has been in every single game.
Yep.
This Kansas State team is one of the best teams in this conference. And KU went toe-to-toe with them. And I think that, big picture is probably what makes this season so frustrating for a lot of fans, Kevin, is the fact that these games have been so close that you can see the talent and just how good this team actually is. But then at the same time, there are these recurring issues that are big picture and at this point, chronic.
Yeah.
And I think that is probably one of the reasons why I think the disappointment around this game, around this season, is so elevated. It'd be a lot different, Kevin, right? If KU's fallen flat on its face every week and, it's just been bad football. This team has played, I think, every single game right out of the 60 minutes. I think you'd say they played probably about 40, 45 minutes of good football. It's just the issue that kind of those, 15 minutes end up being at crucial times. And when things don't go right, they really don't go right. And I think we'll get into that a little bit here in a minute with early in the game.
Yeah, it was the whole season in one game, right? Because you have some games where the offense played really well and the defense really struggled. And you had portions of that. You have portions of other games where the offense didn't perform and the defense did really well. You had some of that in this one. You had special teams gaffes, you had turnovers, you had coaching mistakes, potentially time management, all of these different, you had situational play calling that in some cases maybe wasn't the best. And so if you're checking off sort of your bingo card for KU football, you would have hit it on everything for over the course of the whole year. And I think one of the frustrating things about it to a lot of people is this was actually a really good opponent, right? Kansas State is probably going to make it to the Big 12 title game. And when you look at that and say, well, my gosh, you arguably outplayed this team in Manhattan, where K-State feels like they're about 8 times better than they are on the road.
Yeah.
How do you lose some of the other games that you lost? You feel like the team last night would have finished off West Virginia, would have beaten Illinois, would have beaten UNLV. But they happened last night. That effort went against a team that if you didn't make those one or two plays, like it's happened all year long, it was a game that you could lose, and they did ultimately lose.
That they did, Kevin. Let's get into this. Let's start from the beginning. The kickoff. So KU gets the ball first, and I was looking at some stats prior to the game, Kevin. KU was past tense 15-5 under Leipold when Kansas scored first.
Huh.
And going into this game, I wondered kind of as I was driving to Manhattan thinking about the game, maybe this is a game where I don't know if KU would have taken the ball first if they'd won the toss, but where it's not the end of the world if you get the ball first because you get the chance to really set the tone and give yourself that margin early on where if K-State starts right, maybe they get a touchdown and then that all of a sudden the pressure's on you because if you don't score there, all of a sudden it feels like K-State then is going to be able to go and 2-score lead all of a sudden, it's not over, but the momentum and you're really going to have to fight uphill. And so for KU to start the game the way they did with that drive was really, I thought, impressive. And a huge shout out to Sevion Morrison for his run. That was a gritty run, by far his best play since he's gotten to Kansas. And this is someone that's had to bide his time. He's had injuries. He's really struggled to stay healthy. He's had 2 really good running backs ahead of him. And this is something that Leipold talks a lot about. Can you be ready when your number is called? And you don't know when that moment's going to be. And for Sevion, this was his moment. And he gets the carry. He breaks some tackles. He gets within the 5, breaks 2 more tackles, gets in the end zone. Like, it was a gritty run and a great way to start the game for KU. And obviously then there's the injury to Devin earlier on the drive on that 3rd down where there's an element of luck that he's able to get that fumble back. And then obviously he goes to the blue tent, goes to the locker room, comes back out with the brace on the shoulder. But for KU, like a gritty way to start the game in a really positive note.
Yeah, and you've written some great stuff about how good Kansas has been on early drives. They've done scripted stuff really, really well. One of the things that does kind of crack me up, and we'll talk about it here more in a little bit, though, giving that carry to Sevion Morrison on 3rd down. And people have almost kind of memed it a little bit because Jeff Grimes has talked about it and joked about at different press conferences how sometimes on 3rd down, it's the best time to run the ball because they aren't expecting it. If you run the ball on 3rd and 7 and you get stopped short, everybody is calling for your head and saying, what the heck is this guy thinking? It worked out a couple times against Kansas State where they were able to catch K-State. I don't know if you'd say napping, but kind of were able to use that to their advantage. In this case, like you said, a great run, a great start. I think one of the other things, too, about starting off the way that you do is K-State's crowd was terrific, but by getting that early score, you kind of take some of that early heat off from the crowd and you don't allow them to build that momentum because that place when it's hot, it can be really, really hard to play.
Totally. And I think that's what makes this next portion of the game a what if moment early on. And I mean, Leipold again has talked about it so much. Like before Illinois, he talked about it, before West Virginia, like before any road game, it's very common that he brings up the fact that if you want to go win on the road, the best thing you can do for yourself early in the game is to take the crowd out of it. And the way KU started with that first drive, KU then getting that stop, and then the almost touchdown to Quentin Skinner. That is, for me, one of the biggest sliding doors moments early in the game. And obviously it leads to more moments we'll talk about. But that was the play, Kevin. Like, that was the home run call, the equivalent of what Kansas did against Houston, right? Where there's the one play drive where it's you get the ball back, boom, shot downfield. We're trying to go for the kill shot early. And KU was close, but the ball, the way Skinner goes to catch it, he's not able to. And that's easily one he'd love to have back. But that, Kevin, as soon as he dropped that, in my head, I may have even tweeted, I was like, that feels big.
Yeah.
Because those are the chances that you get. And if you want to beat a team like K-State that consistently finds ways to win, you can't leave those almost moments in the end zone. And that was
Different
a really, really big one.
different time period in the game, and he actually apologized for it this week. But it reminded me of the Rich Miller pick and
Oh,
dropped pick in a lot of ways, and that thing that came in the third quarter. But it was a similar thing where you're really putting K-State behind the eight ball, where they're kind of like, oh, like we're in trouble in this. But dropping that interception in that circumstance, and then dropping the potential touchdown pass here, where you had a chance to put K-State down 14-0, you've gotten the stop. Potentially, you're taking a little bit of air out of K-State's run game a little bit if you're even able to stretch things out a little bit more than that. It did feel absolutely huge. It felt like a game-changing moment in real time. When it happened, you thought, hey, that feels like something that we could be talking about after the game is over. And Kansas winds up punting the ball. K-State, Dylan Edwards fair catches at the 5, and you're like, man, you missed the touchdown, but at least they're pinned there, and that didn't really last very long.
No, and look, 2 explosive plays. I think, what was it,
Yeah.
like 29 yards on 2 plays, ends the first quarter. And then K-State goes and scores. And this is, for me, like, the Skinner one's important. Jalen fumbling late in the game's important. If you want to talk about the biggest domino falling in this game, it's Jameel Croft stepping out of bounds at the 1-yard line. And here's the thing about this, and this is a two-way street here, Kevin, because on the one hand, you can go back to last week and point to a mental error on the opening kickoff against Houston, where he tries to, I think he maybe muffed it and then tried to run the ball out, and he gets to like the 10, but then there's a face mask penalty, which makes the mistake more or less go away.
Yep.
And then on this one, there are so many options in this play, and I can understand it from his perspective of, you see the ball coming and you want to try and catch it because it's out of the end zone, but then you're getting close to the sideline, and there are just so many different ways this could have gone, and it went the worst possible result, which is you catch it inbounds and step out of bounds, right? There's that rule where if you have a foot out of bounds, you can catch it and it counts as an out of bounds play because you are out of bounds. You can fair catch it in that instance. There are just so many different ways to handle that. You can let it bounce if you want to take a little bit more risk. A lot of ways to handle it, and it just didn't go right. And I will say this, like, I've heard that Jameel Croft has looked good in practice at times, doing kickoff returns, and has had some good returns. So this isn't someone that's like, it's been terrible. Like, he's earned this role, and it's just a bad moment at a bad time, and things just unraveled from there.
Yeah, and you look at, obviously everybody brings up the special teams gaffes against Kansas State because it's so easy, and it feels like every year there's at least one.
Yeah.
But it's always different guys, though, isn't it, Swain? I mean, you look at the O.J. Burroughs muff 2 years ago when they were in Manhattan, the Trevor Wilson muff a year ago, and then with what happened here, it's always different guys. I understand, too, kind of being caught between two minds. But like you said, if you put that hand up and it's a fair catch, you're just fine if that happens there. And so I think he was probably caught between doing a couple different things and just the worst possible outcome. If you have outcomes A through E, with A being the best and E being the worst, that was pretty much the worst possible way that could have gone. Of course, the officials initially ruled that, hey, he stepped out, he was fine, it's going out, and then on review went ahead and overturned that thing. Kansas is pinned on the 1-yard line, and then K-State sends some guys. Kansas predictably runs up the middle to try and get some room, instead to get tackled in the backfield for a safety. And then when you add that to K-State's following drive, where they go in and get into the end zone, because all of that is all kind of one big moment, I feel like. Instead of being up 14-0, all of a sudden you're down 16-7.
Exactly, Kevin. And that's the thing. It's almost like a basketball run, right? Where it's a 16-0 run. Like you don't hear about that in college football very often, or like a 17-0 run in college football. That doesn't feel like something that very much happens in such condensed periods of time, like it did in this game. And KU's offensive line for me, I thought had a solid game blocking in the run. That was a time when, man, you look at it, K-State knew what was coming. They sent more guys than KU could block, and that was a really tough play to begin with. And that's just one of those where terrible situation meets impossible play call because KU as a shotgun team, are you going to go under center for the first time this season at that point to try QB sneak? And then, maybe then you're worried about, okay, a muff snap. Do you try and throw it? I don't know. Like, it's just a tough spot to be in. And KU got punished to the fullest extent.
Yeah. And just absolutely brutal turn of momentum. And at that point, I think you're almost thinking KU is teetering. This is a situation that if K-State gets a stop here, this thing could get uncomfortable in a hurry. And credit where it's due, Swain. Kansas really fought in this one and really battled. And the response, I thought, was terrific. I know we'll get to a few plays that didn't go his way, but I really felt like if Jalen Daniels didn't have the game that he had, this game would have gotten away from Kansas earlier than it did. And he was a big part of the reason that Kansas needed Jalen to be kind of the Jalen of old to be even in this thing.
Yeah.
And he did a great job here.
He really did, man. And to see the offense come out cold, right? They're on the field for 6 seconds of game time. Yeah. They're on the sideline for 8 minutes of game time. I just looked it up right here. I think it was 7:40 p.m. when that K-State drive basically started, maybe 7:35. The KU offense didn't get back out on the field until about 8:12 p.m. So you're talking about 30 minutes of just sitting on the sidelines. And then KU comes out and is able to have the drive it did. And huge credit to Trevor Wilson for the catches he made.
Yeah.
Some of them are blending together, so I can't remember if this is the one where he had the up top like that. But, man, Jalen was nails on that drive. Trevor Wilson was nails. Like, this was the ultimate gut check drive. Because if KU goes 3 and out there, like, it's over. Like, this is going to end up being ugly. But the fact that KU's offense had, the ability then to go out cold and execute like that was super encouraging. And it's a super huge credit to those guys for having that mental fortitude to stay locked in throughout that long period of time, watching things unravel and not equally letting that get to you. Or then you go out and press, right? They went out there, they did their thing and executed. And as a result, KU gets back into it 16-14.
Yeah, and I thought Jeff Grimes up to this point, I thought was calling a pretty good game. And look at some of the passing concepts they had. They did a nice job of getting Jalen out of the pocket, which if you've seen K-State play before, you do not want to be in the pocket. They're very good at getting after the quarterback. And they did a good job of getting him out there. They did a good job of putting their receivers in spots where they could win. You saw the Trevor Wilson big catch on this drive. You brought up the third down play where Luke Grimm kind of runs the out and then gets up the sideline to sort of the touchdown.
Huge.
Was a situation where you put Luke Grimm in a position where he could win. And I thought the other thing too is I feel like, Swain, we're growing in what we're seeing from Jalen Daniels in the run game. And I don't just mean his effectiveness, but also the variety of ways that they're using him. You saw him in this game, doing some read stuff, doing some option stuff, but also they ran like a QB sweep at one point where they just, swept guys out to the outside and got him out there. And so I thought this was probably a matchup where K-State was keying on we aren't going to let KU's running backs beat us. And I think that it was a situation then where if you involved Jalen and got him moving and got him pulling the ball in some circumstances, it opened some things up too.
Exactly. And I think K-State did a really good job on those speed options, Kevin. I think KU ran it 3 times, and K-State just had that thing read those 3 times. But I thought that, the QB draw game was super effective. And KU did a good job early on. There was the reverse on one of those as well. Like, I agree with your assessment of Grimes in the first half. It felt like a well-called game that players didn't always execute, right? Like, that was a great call to get Quentin Skinner open in the end zone. He just didn't catch the ball. And I think there are a couple other instances you can think of where I think KU's play calling was very solid, and then the decision-making doesn't exactly line up. And we can fast forward to the end of the half now, Kevin, where as soon as I saw the clock tick under 3 minutes in the half, when K-State had the ball, I was like, oh, okay. We've all seen this movie a million times, right? Something stupid's going to happen. K-State's going to, fumble their way into a 50-yard run somehow. And credit to Kansas defense for getting the stop, because for so much of the season, Kevin, we've been talking about this. You can't give away free points at the end of the first half, especially when you're not getting the second half kickoff. And for KU's defense to get the pair of stops it got was really, really important. And for the offense, that was when I think really like the first mistake of the game, was really punished by K-State, because, you can talk about the one to Skinner, that's going to happen. But to turn the ball over in that spot is tough, because there's the chance KU can go into halftime with the lead, right? All that stuff. Listening to Jalen Daniels talk about it post-game, he made 2 points. First point, saw one-on-one coverage with Trevor Wilson. He saw the safety over the top. He thought he could throw it in there for the one-on-one coverage. That's point 1. Point 2, he felt like the defensive back for Kansas State, who was doing that man-to-man coverage on Trevor Wilson, impacted Trevor so he couldn't make a play on the ball. And therefore, it's intercepted. Give us your feel on that. Should that have been a flag? What did you think about the throw and the read and the timing of it all?
I thought the read was off. I thought it was a ball that shouldn't have been thrown, especially, Swain, we're talking about second down, right? Like, live to fight another down, live to potentially get your field goal if you're able to move the ball a little bit closer. You're not taking a touchdown off the board by not going for it there. You still had plenty of time. And so I thought it was a shot that didn't need to happen. I think Trevor Wilson was absolutely impacted off of it. But I also think that if Jalen had probably thrown that thing a little bit closer to Trevor, not overthrown it quite as much, he probably would have gotten that call. And instead, I don't know if the refs just flat said, hey, that thing's uncatchable, or if they couldn't see Wilson being as impacted because the ball was, carried over past him. But either way, it's a throw that I don't think needed to be made at that point.
Yeah, it was definitely a home run ball, right? Yeah. That's one of those that I think we've seen Jalen throw before this year, right? Trying to make the big play. And I think, Kevin, it was actually first down, which makes it, at least on the stats here, it says first down.
I think you're right, actually.
But I think, like, you think a time situation, look, you want to go to hit a home run, cool. I think the fact that Jalen had said that he saw the safety over the top makes me think, ooh, okay. Maybe it's just different, right? Because for early in the year, Kevin, right, it was, hey, I just didn't see the safety. He made a great play. This one was, I saw it. I thought I could throw it in there. And that also probably speaks to the confidence Jalen is playing with, which is a huge thing for Kansas right now. And the reason why in a game like this, Kansas is even in it, And so KU then, Avery Johnson's pass in the first half counts, which was a weird thing, right? Where there's a flag and they pick it up.
Yeah.
That was weird. But then obviously halftime, second half starts, K-State scores. And look, Kevin, for much of the first half, Kansas did such a great job defensively on Giddens and stopping DJ from really getting going. And then what was it, like the third play of the second half? He just takes it 54 yards. and just flips the field in that moment. And for me at that time, Kevin, I wondered, okay, did K-State figure something out? Are they going to come out and run the ball really well? Because in the first half, Kevin, K did a very solid job, I think, of really slowing down that K-State rushing attack. 64 rushing yards in the first half, under 5 yards a carry. That's solid work, especially for a run defense on Kansas that hasn't been great. And then obviously that drive happens from K-State.
Yeah, Giddens winds up getting basically half of his yardage on one play, a little more than half of his yardage. And
You're right.
He winds up, I think, with 102, and he had 54 on that one run. So his other 17 carries, doing quick math off the top of my head, which I shouldn't probably ever do. His other 17 carries got 48 yards. So you look at the fact that they were really, really good on DJ Giddens, except for the one time that they weren't. And that really hurts. And you saw some really poor angles taken on that play. I thought, it was a good run, but it was a run that kept going and kept going, kind of because guys were taking poor pursuit angles and were overrunning things and all of that. But that's kind of been a story of this season, right? Is the fact that Kansas has had periods where it's been really good defensively, and then one of the weak spots has been allowing explosives, and quite frankly, explosives at the wrong times.
Exactly, yeah. And then Kevin, though, right? The offense again responds, and that is such a huge theme of this game, is the fact that the offense just really early in the game, until the point we're about to get to, really did a great job of responding. And again, another well-called drive. And overall, at that point, you're thinking, okay, like this is going to be a ball game in the second half, and it's going to be really closely contested. What'd you kind of think of that next or first drive then of the second half? Because it falls in line with Kansas' success this year, coming out of the half and just start a game in terms of having success, being able to score.
Yeah, the Savion Morrison run came on 3rd and 8, and Devin Neal's touchdown run, the 24-yarder on this one, came on 3rd and 7. And so part of me was kind of like, man, they found something here that K-State in third down situations is not putting itself into position to stop the run. But part of me was kind of thinking, man, if one of those gets stopped short, there are going to be a lot of people really pissed off right now. And so it was kind of funny. Great blocking, great run by Devin, who was, Devin was kind of held in check for a lot of the day. Not necessarily that he played poorly, because it did feel like he was getting 4 yards here, 4 yards there, but he wasn't really breaking out a whole lot. And I feel like that was one of those chances that he got to break out, and he took advantage of it.
That was I'm going to will this to happen run.
Yes.
Very similar almost to Savion's touchdown run, where you break a tackle. It feels like, okay, he'll go down around like the 10 or the 5. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, like he's in the end zone. And for Devin Neal too now, right, we're talking history for him, where he is approaching the all-time rushing yard record, I should say. And he is now, I think it is the all-time touchdown leader for Kansas. And so, I mean, this had the chance to, in the second half, really be a historical performance from Devin Neal, akin to the one against Oklahoma State 2 years ago, right, where he had over 100 yards receiving, 200 yards rushing, like iconic game from him. And at this point in time, it felt like, okay, things are starting to trend towards Devin Neal could have his shot at breaking the record for rushing yards, and also helping KU snap this losing streak. And in terms of, then there's a little bit of a lull there where, K-State comes down, Avery Johnson fumbles, KU gets close to midfield, then they punt. I know this was a big decision that a lot of people were talking about, is the decision to punt from plus territory. KU gained a net 26 yards from that punt because it goes out the back of the end zone and it's touchback. What'd you think there, Kevin? I mean, would you like, and I know if anyone had asked about it post game, there would have been revisionist history about it because of the way it played out. But what'd you think of that decision in the moment?
Oh, I thought it was awful in the moment. I mean, it was definitely a decision that I think you would agree was widely panned in the press box as it was happening. You know, a lot of things it's easy to come back with the benefit of hindsight and say, "Oh, this was a good decision," or "That was a bad decision." At the time that they were punting, people were kind of like, "Really?" Like on the plus side of the 50, fourth and 2 in this situation, you really want to give it back. And the defense had a great second half overall.
Mm.
But I think at that point, you hadn't really stopped K-State
You're right.
a
Yeah,
ton.
yeah,
And
exactly.
so you're kind of feeling like, man, this is a big risk here. I mean, remembering that you gave up a 95-yard drive in the first half, that you had the different things offensively that K-State was able to do. Something that I just noticed, Swain, that I'm not sure that I knew before now. You realize K-State's last touchdown came with their first touchdown in the third quarter. 13-15 left in the third quarter. That was the last time K-State found the end zone. But at that time that they punted, there wasn't any way to see like, hey, these guys aren't going to drive it the length of the field and score a touchdown.
Well, the fact too, right, Kevin, that K-State had just moved the ball, and then
Yep.
Avery has the moment with the pump. Like that was a weird turnover
Yeah.
from Avery Johnson, and KU takes advantage. And so you're right. Like at that point in time,
Shout out Jeremy Robinson for getting credit for the sack, by the way, when Avery basically threw the ball into the ground.
That was funny. So all right, so Kevin, here we can even look at that. So before the fumble, right, that was 4 plays, 49 yards. Right. Then they had a touchdown drive before that. Then the drive before halftime when time expired. Okay. Right. They punted once and then they had their 2 touchdowns. So like you're looking at it in the time and you're thinking, man, KU's defense has not really gotten that many stops.
Yeah.
But then they really did step up huge. And that was a huge 3 and out to get in that moment. Then obviously KU comes back. There's the throw to Luke Grimm, I want to say, in that moment.
Yep.
And then KU scores. And then it's like, okay, game on. K-State comes down, and Avery Johnson has what two throws to Will Ancio that he probably should have caught. And I don't know, Kevin. I joked with you about Will Ancio being a blocking tight end and not really being known for his catching skills. Granted, he did score a touchdown in the first half, but that was another one of those moments where I don't know if you call it a break, but the moment went KU's way. And at that point in time, then all of a sudden you're thinking about the fumble. That moment went KU's way. You're thinking about then KU getting a little bit, but punting, getting the ball back and scoring. That's a swing that went KU's way. Getting a field goal on this possession for K-State, then that felt like a swing. And all of a sudden the momentum is starting to feel like it's going Kansas' way as we're getting close to the fourth quarter. Yeah, at that point in time. So it just felt like things were starting to move KU's way after we had seen the swing early in the first half to go K-State's way. And just all of a sudden momentum went KU's way. And then there was another lull. And that really, I think, is when some of the offensive stuff for me comes into play.
Yeah, I would 100% agree. I think most of us felt like watching the game in real time. Okay, you're fine. K-State got they missed a touchdown, got dropped. They got a field goal. You still have a lead. The Kansas offense had been terrific at that point. Drive the ball down the field, find a way to get a touchdown, and you're really looking like you're in a good spot here. One of those things where I think it's the Sandra Bullock meme, the run the dang ball thing, where I think a lot of fans watched that fourth quarter and felt like Kansas was getting into 2nd and 6, 2nd and 4, some situations that would seem to make it to where you would be able to lean on that running game. And for whatever reason, Kansas decided to throw the ball on some of those second downs. You could say, hey, we didn't think we'd be able to convert on 3 straight runs. You could say, hey, we thought we set them up for the pass. Whatever your reasoning is, Kansas didn't run the ball in those situations. I think on that first drive, there was the incompletion to Jared Casey. They tried the flea flicker later in the fourth quarter, which to some extent it's really interesting to me because I feel like some of the things that Kansas did were really passive, right? Punting the ball on the plus side of the 50 is a playing not to lose, playing field position game. But then you have like the flea flicker stuff, and it's almost like you're trying to knock them out with one punch, right? You're throwing the haymaker rather than, taking the open shots to the body that are potentially there. And so to me, there was that really interesting sort of dichotomy, I guess, between Kansas swinging for the fences, maybe even in situations where they shouldn't have been swinging for the fences, versus the times when Kansas was being really cautious and maybe should have been swinging a little bit more.
Totally. So we can start at the beginning of the fourth quarter then, Kevin.
Yep.
And there's the first drive, right, where Devin Neal gets the ball.
Yep.
Right. 4-yard carry. Then it goes pass after that. Okay.
Yep.
Devin Neal touched the ball 2 more times, running the ball in the game after that. The next run comes the 10:28 mark, first down and 10, 4-yard run. Right. And then I'm going to pull that up here real quick. That's the one.
That's the drive KU got the first down on.
Yes, and then he's sacked, and then he gets the that's the one when the Logan Brown has a holding call.
Yeah, the holding call that takes away the 2nd and 4 and makes it. Yeah, the one where he scrambled after standing in the pocket for a long time, and Logan Brown gets the holding call, and they get pushed back, and then he winds up getting sacked to kind of end the drive.
Yeah, exactly. And then the next drive they get, right, 3:59 left in the game, under 4 minutes. Devin Neal, 2-yard run, and then KU was going to run it there, based on what Bryce Cabledew did coming off the line, where it was aggressive. It was not a pass set from Bryce Cabledew when he false started. So KU was going to run it there, but then Bryce Cabledew, your 5th-year senior, false starts and puts you behind the 8 ball again, where then KU goes pass, they go pass, and then Jalen tries to scramble.
Yep.
Runs into 3 guys, fumbles the ball. And that is I think, really the catastrophic mistake. It's another one of those I want to go make a play type of moments, from Daniels, and time, score, situation.
Yep.
Just leaves a lot to be desired there, I think.
Yeah, he got 9 yards and fumbled, and I think if he had taken 7 and slid, you're in a makeable 3rd down situation at that point. And so that was the play that I was thinking that was on 2nd down, where you do have another down still to fight after that. And so just get down, let that clock keep moving. At that point, you're leading. The clock is still your friend. And the one thing that you really can't afford to do, I think, because Avery Johnson threw the ball, I thought, fairly well in the middle of the field. Avery Johnson really struggled to throw the ball outside of the numbers. And when you look at that and you look at the drive that Kansas State would have had to put together, even if KU punted the ball back to them, where they would have had to travel down the field, they couldn't really lean on the running game as much because of the time constraints and the things like that. And you're asking Avery to make those throws that he'd really struggled to make kind of all night. The one thing you couldn't have in that situation was a turnover to create a short field. And unfortunately, and I really say unfortunately, because if for no other reason, we talked about it, Jalen had a great game. Jalen was a big part of the reason Kansas was in the lead at that point.
Yeah.
But that wound up being one of the biggest mistakes of the game, and will be one of the things that people remember about it.
Exactly. Close, but no cigar.
Yeah,
that is going to be, I don't know. That's the issue with this game, right? Is the fact that there are some really good things Jalen did. There are some really good things the KU defense did. And just it wasn't quite enough, and KU made the catastrophic mistake when really you needed to play it safe. And look, it's, you can say, oh, he should have done this, should have done that. understand it, trying to make a play. But I think that's another one of those situations where you got to have a feel for time, score. What are you trying to accomplish here? And understanding that, yeah, you're right, Kevin. You still got another down. And worst case, you force them to call a timeout. You get another chance at a first down with the way you've been moving the ball at times during the game. Not really in this period of the game, but at times, KU had moved the ball well, especially on the ground. So, and then K-State has the ball, and from there, it's up to the defense to try and make the play. The next kind of almost play for KU is that DJ Withers almost getting the interception there. He was falling down as it happened. That was unfortunate for him, but yeah, that was really it. Both teams made mistakes in this game, Kevin.
Oh yeah,
KU just made the biggest mistake last.
It's funny you say that because I was walking out after the game, and I'm sure it was the same when you came out. There were still a few K-State fans kind of loitering around the parking lot. And one of the things that you were hearing from different people is like, man, we did not play very well. And I kind of think it's funny because K-State obviously won the game, but I think that both sides came away feeling like they left plays on the field. You talk about the Devin Neal fumble early on that Devin was lucky to get back. You look at the Avery Johnson pump fake fumble that kills a scoring drive. You look at K-State dropping a touchdown pass with Will Ancio. K-State had plays that were there too. And I think when you look at it from one side, it's really easy to say, oh, KU should have won the game. It was all on KU. They made all the mistakes. And, K-State's a good team. And they're a good team for a lot of reasons. One of the reasons is when they don't play that well, they still find a way to win a lot of times. They still find a way to make that play that they have to make. And unfortunately for Kansas so far this year, that's been the opposite thing, where they've kind of not made the play that they've needed to make, or the other team has been able to make that play. And I think one of the biggest plays too, first of all, shout out to Brian Borland, because Kansas got like no pressure whatsoever on Avery Johnson for 3.5 quarters. And then he gets to him twice with the Marvin Grant blitz, one for a sack to kind of kill a drive. And then again, nearly forces that turnover on the last drive. And if he had just gotten the sack, if Avery hadn't gotten that ball off, they would have been out of Tennant's field goal range. And so it was one of those things where you were this close. Yeah. I think Tennant's career long was 51, and he had a 51-yarder. In that circumstance, in that rivalry game, Kansas kid, from just up the road here at Mill Valley, a lot of pressure on that kid, and kudos to him. I mean, he drilled that thing right through. And so that was, like I said, it's so easy to sit here and say, well, all you did was make mistakes, but K-State's kicker made a big time play in a really big moment there.
And that thing was good from like 55.
That may have been the hardest Tennant has ever kicked a football in his life.
Yeah, he nuked that ball.
Very, very impressive kick.
It really was. It really was an impressive kick and a really like a winning play from your special teams guy. And obviously, we didn't mention it, Kevin, but KU missing that point after earlier is another one of those special teams blunders. And, we're talking about a game here that's decided by 2 points.
You have a safety and a mixed extra point. That's 3. That's not even counting the drop touchdown pass. Some of the other things like
and it's just straight up
3 points right there on special teams.
And that's the thing. So let me get to the last drive, Kevin. And I mean, that was a freaking the meme these days where it's like the guy, he's got like the war background behind him, and he's got like the battle helmet on, and he looks like disheveled. It's like a cartoon meme. I don't know if I'm describing it right, but like that was Jalen Daniels on this final drive, because it was a war zone in the backfield every single play. And for much of the game, Kevin, K-State had some success with their blitzes, especially through the A-gap. But it felt like KU did a decent job against them. And then on this drive, like K-State just like turned it up just another level, and KU did not adjust. I think you can say that, right, Kevin? Like every snap, it became pretty clear what K-State was going to do. They're going to send the house every time and make Jalen run for his life, and just didn't feel like there was a quick enough adjustment from Kansas to what K-State was doing to try and offer something different in that situation.
Yeah. I think that they didn't have an answer for it. Whether that answer was Jalen check at the line, get somebody into a hot route position that you can connect on, whether that was them sending in a play that, hey, this is designed to beat a blitz, whether it's a screen pass or something of that nature. They needed to do something because I think everybody in the stadium saw that it was going to be a jailbreak up front. And Jalen had done a great job all night avoiding pressure and kind of stepping away from this guy, running away from this guy, and giving himself just enough time. But there's only so much that he can do. And when guys are coming free like that, I don't remember how many pressures K-State had, but they got credit for 2 on that final drive, and they probably should have. I mean, you don't get credit for a pressure when you chase somebody out of the pocket and they run. So like the final play, for instance, doesn't count as a pressure, but it felt like Jalen was pretty much lit up every time on that final drive when he was going.
Yeah, exactly. Well, here, Kevin, I'll put it to you like this. All right. So throughout the course of the game, Jalen was pressured 40% of his throws. And that feels a lot higher than what it felt like in real time, but it probably shows you how good Jalen was. On those throws, Kevin, Jalen completed 25% for 3.8 yards per attempt. For the rest of the game, Kevin, it was 75% completion rate for 8.2 yards per attempt. So when he was kept clean, you're looking at like prime Jalen Daniels, right? 75% completion rate, over 8 yards per attempt. And when he was pressured, K-State did a great job of pressuring with good man coverage where those guys were able to stay covered for just, long enough. And KU, just didn't have the adjustment in time. And I don't think we can cuss on this, so I can't quote Lance Leipold, which is a huge problem. Yeah. So, all right, I want to pull this up for you, Kevin, because I think it's a really interesting way to look at this game. So this is some of the advanced numbers from the game, and success rate shows you how consistent you are.
Sure.
Basically, right? It's like on first down, do you gain X amount of yards? Second down, you gain it just shows you like how good you are throughout the course of the game. KU's success rate was higher than Kansas State's, 47% to 42%. 5% may not sound like a lot, but that's the difference between being in the 76th percentile in KU's case or being in the 53rd percentile. So in this game offensively for KU, even with the struggles late in the game, KU still put together a performance that was very solid. And you can look at the other side for K-State and say that you can see how KU's defense did a good job of slowing K-State down. Yes, they had some big plays, but down to down, things were relatively solid throughout the course of the game. And it's just an interesting way to look at this one where it matches kind of your eye test of this is a game KU probably should have won. And because of those mistakes, like we mentioned, the special teams blunders, giving a possession away at the end of the half, like things like that, that's how you lose a game like this when, again, down to down consistency, KU showed that it was just slightly better.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Another way to look at it, and this is kind of gross to think about, but Kansas went into the fourth quarter with a 4-point lead, right? 27-23. In the fourth quarter, K-State averaged 2.2 yards per play and won.
Oh my God, that's crazy. What?
And so that's, obviously you had the Jalen turnover in there that set up that second field goal. But yeah, K-State averaged 2.2 yards per play in the fourth quarter. K-State didn't score a touchdown like we talked about from the 13-15 mark in the third quarter on. Scored 6 points from that point on, and K-State won. And it's there were all kinds of opportunities, and I think too. This is going to sound like a really minor thing. I thought there was a little bit of maybe a clock management thing on that final drive too, where you call timeout after like the 3-yard completion or whatever, heading into third down. You've only got 2 timeouts left. You figure you want to save one for setting up your field goal, right? You still had plenty of time. You were at the 46-yard line. You're basically at midfield. I wouldn't have called timeout there. I would have held on to him. And then I think after the way K-State had sent blitzes, I think I would have called timeout on between third and fourth down just to be like, hey, let's get on the same page on this thing. Let's make sure that we're calling somebody that we want to call, but calling something we want to call. But yeah, that in the grand scheme of things, that's kind of a minor thing, but we've talked about how Kansas is in every game this year, and all of them are pretty much one-score games. Even the TCU game that wound up being a 2-score game was a one-score game in the fourth quarter. When that happens, everything gets so amplified. You look at a dropped pass by Quentin Skinner and you say, that's the game. You look at a decision like Jameel Cross, you say, that right there, the ensuing touchdown drive right after it, that's the game. You look at a bad play call, calling a flea flicker on 2nd and 4. Well, if you run the ball, the clock maybe goes down. That's the game. Jalen's fumble, that's the game. Maybe a coaching decision here, that's the game. And it's been like that every single game. And we've talked about it on here quite a bit, but it's all different people, Swain. Like it's not, it would be so much easier because you could fix it, right? If it was one guy who said, hey, the guy lined up at tight end is not good enough. Well, you can replace that tight end and then you can try and win a game. If it's, hey, the guy calling plays isn't good enough, you can replace that guy and theoretically get better. This K-State game was a microcosm for all of that because there were time periods when Jeff Grimes was really, really good and was calling a great game. And I think we can say that in the fourth quarter, Kansas maybe didn't handle that thing super well, didn't run the ball as much as they should. And you talked about Devin Neal's shoulder brace. I'm not trying to make excuses. I'm honestly asking. I do wonder if maybe there was a reluctance to give the ball to Devin 5 or 10 times in the fourth quarter in that situation because there was maybe something a little bit there. But then you could say give the ball to Savion Morrison, or there are workarounds, right? But you had times in this one where the defense really struggled, gave up explosive plays, gave up a 95-yard drive, and they allowed 2.2 yards per play in the fourth quarter. And so you have these success rates and things that show up really, really well. And then you also have these mistakes by, in some cases, players that have played a lot of football and should know better. You've got clock management mistakes in a lot of these games. You've got play calling mistakes. In some cases, you could maybe even say scheme mistakes. It's all over the place. And unfortunately, it was one of those games where if one thing goes differently, Kansas beats a team that might wind up being the Big 12 champion at the end of the year at their place. But those things didn't go right.
Yeah, well, okay. So you mentioned the timeouts, like KU having to burn a timeout because they late subbed on a play.
That was bad. Yeah,
that's personnel and that's coaching. That is coaching.
Yep, that's 100% coaching.
Yeah, like you don't sub with 15 seconds left, because what would happen on the reverse side, Kevin? Which I think it's Jim Panagos who's on the sideline, and he would wave over to DJ Withers and Tommy Dunn, come off, and then Keenan Caldwell and Blake Harold would just walk onto the field, and then the other team would have to call a timeout. Like KU has done that before, and
K-State has done that before, and that's another thing is that needs to be in scouting report. We cannot late sub against these guys because they will call us on this. K-State
exactly
several times this year.
Exactly, and so that's one of those moments where KU would have probably loved to have that timeout at the end of the game. But because of that moment earlier, they don't have it. And then, for Devin, look, I'll say this. I'm super bummed for him for a few reasons.
Yep.
he's 7 yards short
of
becoming the all-time leading rusher. And for him to be able to just paint the picture in your head, for him to be able to do it, icing the game against Kansas State to snap a 15-game losing streak, and then also as a Lawrence kid do become the program's all-time leading rusher.
Yep.
You put it was a storybook potential of an ending, and it doesn't happen. And that is a bummer to think about for Devin.
You talked about the fact that KU could still potentially reach a bowl because they're in all these games. But if KU had won last night, I'm not saying you're predicting a 3-5 team to go bowling, but after they just beat K-State in Manhattan, you wouldn't bet against them. You would say, hey, they've got this thing turned. You don't think so?
I don't know. There was plenty of stuff that it depends on if we're rewriting history here, Kevin. It all depends on how some of that stuff plays out at the end, because there's still some things that showed up in this game that are still mistakes we've been seeing, and that will cost you games against an Iowa State or a BYU or a Colorado.
I get that, but you're 3-5 at that point. You're coming off of a win over K-State in Manhattan, where you won despite even making those mistakes, and you're going into a bye week. I really think that, like I said, I'm not saying that you would predict KU to reach a bowl, but you wouldn't be like, well, there's no way, or it's a long, you wouldn't bet against it necessarily. If somebody said, hey, bet your mortgage on this thing, you wouldn't make that bet at 3-5 with a win.
Well, I don't have a mortgage, so it's not even something to worry about.
Okay. All right. But one other thing real quick. Let's take out K-State's 3 knees at the end of the game, right? Because they shouldn't count. K-State had 2 carries that went for 98 yards. They had 3 passes that went for 100 yards. Granted, one of them was the Jace Brown one, where it's like you declined so that it would end the half, so it shouldn't really count. But even so, they did count. So you've got 5 plays for 198 yards. Right there.
Mm-hmm.
K-State had 64 other plays, Swain, for 284 yards. 4.4 yards a play. And if you're allowing 4.4 yards a play, that's a lead in the Big 12 at least.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no SEC defenses in the Big 12. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely up there. And 4.4 yards a play, you're beating K-State in Manhattan. You just are. Even with mistakes, 4.4 yards of play, you allow that, you're winning. The other plays, though, had a pretty big impact in this one.
That they did. And as a result, right, the big plays are what decide it, right? And the explosive plays are really huge. So now for KU, right, bye week, I do think Luke Gray made an interesting point where he's pissed. He said he's pissed off that they don't get to go and play next week because it's 2 weeks of people on the outside talking about how bad KU is, and that is frustrating. Totally understand that. I think the ability to recenter and reset after a game like this can help because of the letdown factor. Like if KU had to go host Iowa State at Arrowhead this Saturday, I mean, it's a tough thing to come back from, right? You got to flip really quickly to get to Iowa State, which is a really good team. And now KU getting a bye week, right? Some of these older guys can get healthy. You'll get some more young guys, some reps in practice. We'll have to see when we talk to Leipold in 2 weeks what he says about the bye week, because it sounds like they may stay with broadly the same stuff. They may tweak a couple things. But I think the bye week now is a good thing to have after a rivalry game, especially one that goes like this. And look, I would have said the same thing if KU had won. Right, getting a bye week to come down from the win and not having to come down from it against an Iowa State team. So I still think the bye week is a good thing for KU right now. And now it's about finishing the season strong, right? 4 games to go. Iowa State, good team, wants to compete at the top of the Big 12 for a chance to play in the title game. Same thing for BYU on the road. I'm going to keep saying it. I think that game is going to be a 9:30 Central kick, and some weird stuff happens at night in Provo. And then there's Colorado at home. Colorado's actually looking pretty good this year. It is a tough stretch now that KU's going to have coming out of this bye week. Yeah, right. Yeah, Baylor just beat Oklahoma State. all of a sudden, Kevin, this schedule for KU, it's funny how this works too, why college football is so wild. Because if you would have said beginning of the year, hey, you're going to play these teams and you're like, okay, easy schedule. Now you're like, dang, well, an easy schedule would have been having Arizona, Utah, Oklahoma State, instead of having, Iowa State, BYU, and Colorado. So it's just funny how college football changes like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I think throughout the preseason, whenever anybody would say they have an easy schedule, I think I would change easy to manageable. And it's still, even then, it's not looking so manageable now, but I think it is one of those things. It's impossible to predict. Who would have said before the year that Houston would beat Utah? I mean, that was just, Utah was Big 12 favorite and all of those things. And everybody could admit that, hey, Houston's depleted. Shoot, a week ago, Kansas made Houston not look super great at tackle football. And so when you look at all those things too, I think the Big 12 seems to have so much variance week to week almost with how teams look and who looks good this week and doesn't look good next week. But it's a tough schedule. I'm with you though on the bye week coming at the right time. You don't want to let a game like that beat you twice. And I think it's worth noting that for all the faults that people are kind of piling on the coaching staff, this is a team that's 3-0 in their last 3 games coming off a bye week. And I'm not saying I'm predicting them to beat Iowa State, but we've talked before about how KU a lot of times looks refreshed. I think physically in particular, they have a good formula for how they get guys, back up to speed over that bye week. And so if you want to have a chance against Iowa State, it's going to be better coming off a bye week than it would have been if they had just played them right after Kansas State.
I agree. Well, Kevin, that's what I've got thoughts-wise on this game. Wow. I think that's really what I've got for you, Kevin. Wow. Yeah. Be interesting to see how KU finishes the season because, again, I'll keep saying it, guys. Like a 4-8 looks a whole heck of a lot different than a 2-10.
It does.
And KU's got to finish strong. There's so much at stake around this program right now. Whether it be from just player retention, whether it be from player acquisition, maximizing the revenue streams for when this house settlement goes. Like there's so much at stake for Kansas right now that KU needs to finish this season strong. Will they? I have no idea, Kevin. I really don't. Like I said earlier, if you told me that KU wins out, like I'm not going to say like it's impossible. Just based on the stuff I've seen, I'm not going to bet on it because there have been so many things. But that's what makes college football so wild, Kevin. KU could strike gold. They could get rid of all the terrible ends of halves and put it all together. And I would say, yeah, KU's going to play like the team that they have shown they can be through spurts of games and be that more consistently. But if you also said that KU is going to win one more game this year, I'd say, I could see it happening. And so it's going to be really fascinating end of this season because, like I said, there's a whole lot at stake here for KU.
Yeah, there is. And not just – I think in a lot of ways, not just for the season. I mean, the season's important, but where you're at as a program, what you're able to sell to that 2026 class in recruiting, because I think that is a class that they could potentially fare pretty well at, especially in state. Having that. And then the kind of the albatross or the elephant in the room, or however you want to describe it, is trying to get a stadium built and you're trying to raise money for NIL. And all of those things are also impacted by how happy people are with the direction of where your program is going. And so, like you said, people who are sitting there saying, hey, season's over, it's 2-6. I get it. I especially get it when you look at where expectations were, et cetera, where people thought this was a dark horse Big 12 title team. Doesn't look like it's going to be that. Those last 4 games are maybe more important than a lot of people realize in terms of what Kansas is going to be able to carry out of there as a program, as recruiting, as a fundraising unit, all of those different things. And so it's important for them to get back on track.
Exactly. Well, Kevin, as I've got, where can folks check out all your stuff?
Yeah, you guys can watch the Pay Heed podcast over at KCSN. Also, have the Verbal Commitment podcast with our friend Ryan Wallace from Go Power Cat over at 24/7 Sports, and then you can follow me on Twitter at K Flaherty KCSN.
Awesome. Well, hey, thanks a bunch for joining, Kevin, and thank you as always for listening to the Fog.net podcast. Hey, if you made more than an hour and 5 minutes, it's the longest podcast we've done in a very long time. Lots to discuss on this one, but thanks as always for listening. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you drop a comment, like the video, subscribe to the channel, click that little bell. You'll get notified every time we post a video. If you're listening on your preferred podcast platform of your choice, please leave a rating and review as well. It goes a long way in helping us reach a lot of new Kansas fans. That's what we're all about here. So thanks as always for listening to the Fog.net podcast. Don't know what the schedule is going to look like for this week. Maybe we'll have a podcast late in the week. We'll see what happens with that. But as always, thanks for listening. We'll talk to you again soon.